Alright guys, here's the lesson 3.4, solving quadratics by completing the square. Now for completing the square, it's just another way to solve a quadratic equation. It especially works for problems that can't be factored. If our a value, which is the one that's out front, is not equal to a 1, the problem gets really messy. So today on this video, I'm going to show you only problems that have a equal to 1. Write this down. These steps are the ones that you're going to use on the problems for completing the square. We're going to start off by moving the constant, that's the one that doesn't have a variable, to the opposite side of the equal sign. We'll undo it by either adding or subtracting. This next step, you're going to use our calculator. We're going to take half of the b term and square it, and then add it to both sides of the equal signs. We're going to factor the problem because you have completed a perfect square. And then you're going to do like we did on the previous lesson. And you're going to solve by taking the square root. Sometimes we'll get real numbers, sometimes we'll get imaginary numbers. We just have to be really careful with our numbers. So what I'm going to do next is take you through a few problems so you can kind of get the hang of this. On example 1, the first thing I need to do is move that 54 to the other side of the equal sign. To move the 54 to the other side, we're going to subtract it. Make sure you're taking these notes. Leave yourself a space because of what we have to do next. Alright, next thing you're going to do is take the b term, which on this problem is negative 10. And so over in the margin, you're going to take negative 10, half, and square it. Use your calculator so that it's no big deal. And yes, I could do this one in my own head, but I just want to ensure you how to type it in your calculator for those of you who want to use your calculator. So this is what I'm talking about. This is the number that we're going to add to both sides of the equal sign. So I'm going to add 25 here and over here. I do this in the margins just to show my work. Now we're ready to simplify and factor this. Over here on the left, you are always going to get what's called a perfect square trinomial. You're going to put parentheses and a little squared. Whatever the sign is of this b term is going to go right here. Take the square root of the first, so the square root of x squared is x, and take the square root of the last. See how that works? Then over here, you're going to simplify this side. What's negative 54 plus 25? Now we've got a problem like we did in the previous lesson where we need to take the square root of both sides. So take the square root of the left, plus minus, don't forget that, and take the square root of the right. When I take the square root of the binomial squared, I'm left with what's on the inside, and I do not need the parentheses. The square root of negative 29 is the same thing as I, square root of 29. Remember, the negative comes out as an imaginary. And then one more step. How do you get rid of minus 5? We need to add 5. So the answer to problem 1 is 5 plus or minus I square root of 29. Alright, example 2. The first thing we need to do is move the 85 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 85. So I have x squared minus 18x. Leave yourself a space, equals negative 85. Now you're going to take half of negative 18 and square it. I'm going to show you over in the margin. Negative 18 over 2 squared. Again, use your calculator. Negative 18 over 2 squared. This is 81. So this is the space that you left. Write this down. So you're going to add 81 on the left and add 81 on the right. It has to be on both sides of the equal sign. Right? We have created a perfect square trinomial. So you're going to put parentheses with a little 2 every single time. Whatever the sign is in the middle for that b term goes inside the parentheses. Take the square root of the first and take the square root of the last term. Negative 85 plus 81 gives us negative 4. Again, now we're ready just to solve by taking square roots. So I take the square root of the left side plus minus the square root of the right side. When you take the square root of a binomial squared, it leaves you with the radicand. Plus or minus negative, that's going to come out as an I, and then the square root of 4. So this is plus or minus 2i. And then one more step. Move that 9. It's a negative 9, so we have to add. And take a look here. Are these like terms? No, they're not. So it's 9 plus or minus 2i. Okay? Okay, problem number 3. We're going to add 73 to both sides. X squared plus 20x, leave yourself a space, equals 73. Okay, over in the margin, we're going to take half of b, b's this number here with the x, and square it. Use your calculator if you need to. But in my head, I can say, well, half of 20 is 10. 10 squared, that's 100. Add it to both sides of the equal signs. A common mistake is that kids forget to add it to both sides and usually just add it to one side. Okay, so you're always going to get a perfect square trinomial. You bring down whatever sign is in the middle, right here. You take the square root of the first, and then take the square root of the last. Take the square root of both sides. Don't forget plus minus. So I get x plus 10 is equal to, all right, when you type this in your calculator, it does not simplify any further. And our last step is to get x all by itself. Example 4. We still do the same step. Move the 90 to the other side. Leave yourself a space. And then proceed like we did on those other problems. Take half of 6 squared. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So we're going to add 9 to both sides. This always gives you a perfect square. Bring down your plus sign. Take the square root of the first and the square root of the last. Simplify your negative 82 and your positive 9. Take the square root of both sides. Don't forget your plus minus. In your calculator, the square root of 73 doesn't simplify, but I need to bring I out. And then my last step is just to move the 3 over. To move it, you need to subtract it. Another common mistake is students just start moving the 3 over, but they miss the sign. They forget to use the math to move it, instead of just physically moving it to the other side. Alright, I think you've got it after this. We'll see how you do in class. Remember, if you've got questions, please ask me in class.